all the trials and tribulations leading up to this, the wins and the failures, result in the end result. And I think going back to the analogy of the comedian, like I'm playing with the Netflix special right now, and I've been in the clubs for 12 years trying to figure out where I want it to go. And if the general public perceives me now, or looks at my brand, or looks at the business, or looked at my P&L statement, they would see the success, but they wouldn't see all the stories that I just shared with you. And that is really why I wanted to come to the podcast. That's why I really wanted to share the story, because all the flash and glamour doesn't come with all the failures that lead up to it. And I just explained 4 failures that I've had, but I've had hundreds of failures prior to that. These are just 4 from a business perspective that are relevant to the conversation.
Welcome to Beyond the Fail, the podcast where we talk to leaders and entrepreneurs about their biggest business failures. We'll deep dive into how they overcame these setbacks, the lessons they learned from them, all to help you gain valuable insights. Failure is an essential part of the business journey, as well as being the key to success. So we're here to show you how to thrive from it.
Dan, welcome to Beyond the Fail. How are you today? Where are you coming from?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm tuning in through and joining you from Toronto, Canada. So I appreciate you having it on. And this is the power of the internet, as you can connect with, make friends with, and have great conversations with anyone in the world nowadays.
Absolutely. And that's why it's such a game changer in society, isn't it? And it has such a crazy impact on the world. Couldn't have imagined this 50 years ago, right? We could have been doing it by phone, I suppose. Probably wouldn't have been the same.
Yeah, and even before that, you could have been done it through pigeon mail and other things. Communication has come a long way, and I don't know if a few decades in the future, or who knows what it's going to look like. It'll be crazy to think that we used to be on video calls. So
yeah, probably all be VR. So where did it all start for you, Dan?
Yeah, so First things first was like we got connected. I was super interested in your content and the voice that you're trying to give to your audience about failure. I actually don't even know how I came across it. I think it was through some YouTube rabbit hole and listening to different podcasts and business. And I think you're doing a great job of shining the light on honest business. It's not always about the wins. It's not always about the money and the successes. And that's where you want to go and you want to get there eventually. But I think failure is probably the most important part of business, where you're going to learn and evolve and stuff like that. And 99% of the stuff you're going to do, you're going to fail at. And 1%, you're going to win. And those are the ones you have to sort of compound over time to make you successful. So first things first, I appreciate sort of the voice you're doing. And we got connected because this sort of idea resonated with me deeply, because I failed a ton of my career. And I'll give some context and background, but I've had a career now over a decade, and 10 of those years or 11 of those years has been as an employee, specifically in sales. And for anyone who's listening or anyone who's had exposure to this, is in sales, it's all about failure. Everyone are going to say no to you, and you're just trying to find those yeses. You're going to get way more no's than yeses. And I've had the pleasure of having a very successful career in sales. I started my career as an entry-level sales rep at an ed tech company in Toronto, Canada, where I'm based. And I ended my career as an employee as a VP of sales at another tech company here in Toronto. So I've grown throughout my career and developed that. But throughout that entire process, I've actually become very comfortable with, and I've actually embraced failure. And that's why I think this concept sort of resonated with me, because through truthfully just doing it so many times, I've realized that failure is actually a learning experience. And I've kind of changed my mindset around failure as I try to seek out and find failure. Because if you're failing, that means you're trying. And if you're trying, that means you're going to get better at what you're going to do. And if you just do the same thing over and over again, you're not going to make any progress. So throughout my career, I've failed in sales. I've failed in jobs I've been in. I've been fired. I've lost promotions. I've gotten promotions, and now running my own business. I failed a ton being a solo founder. But yeah, my career historically is like a decade in B2B SaaS sales specifically. And now I'm a founder of a company here in Toronto. We can get into the details of both of those, but that's the backstory in a nutshell.
I think that's a really interesting point you made about sales and failure as well, because, I suppose I've always thought about about sales as rejection, but obviously that, the two things are very similar. The concepts around rejection and failure. And obviously if you don't make your sales targets, don't hit your KPIs, in some ways you are failing. You mentioned about, in some ways, seeking out failure. Is that what you meant? You actually try to increase your failure rate in order to, I suppose, get comfortable with it, get the reps in?
Yeah, it's a good point. So two things is like, as an employee, as you said, like missing your quota or not making your numbers, like you are failing. And it's interesting, as a salesperson, I'm very biased towards sales. I think sales is the most important skill that anyone can have. And I think it's an amazing career to have. But sales as an employee, it's very binary. It's very black and white. You either hit your numbers or you didn't hit your numbers. It's a quantitative assessment. So it's very, very clear what failure looks like. In other roles, finance, marketing, whatever, HR, it's not as black and white. So it's really hard to be able to identify failure and learn from failure. But that's the nice thing about sales is like, if you missed your quota or you missed your sales target or you missed your number, whatever it may be, you can then reflect on what failed. Was it the amount of output you had? Was it the conversations you had? Was it your pricing structure? Was it your product offering? Like, you can now assess what the failure was and try to adjust. And that's something that I've always done successful in my career. And I think a lot of people should become comfortable with, is like, when you don't do something that you want to do or you fail at something, it's not, you don't walk away from it. You should actually walk towards that failure and figure out why it happened and try something else so it doesn't happen again. And I think that's one thing that salespeople get really good at, is like, you fail every single day. And if you walk away from failures and hide from failures, you are going to fail in the job of sales and you're not going to be successful. But if you ever speak to people who are successful in sales and have amazing sales careers, they will say the exact same thing, is that they've actually learned from their failures and changed their strategy and approach. And it makes you a lot tougher and more creative, because if you continue to do the same thing, then you're going to get the same results. And that's something that's helped me in my career as an entrepreneur as well, because I have that willingness to sort of push through and try new things instead of just doing the same thing over and over again.
So are you saying that you feel that salespeople are, one, have a better mindset around failure and coping with it, and two, in some ways are become better equipped at handling a failure, the more experience they get?
Yeah, so I would say two things. One, salespeople are professional failers. You are going to close, if you closed 10% of deals as a salesperson, that means you failed 90% of those deals, but you're going to have a successful career. If you can close 30% of deals that you have, you're like a world-class salesman, but you still failed 70% of them. So I think sales is just, in its nature, you're dealing with failure every single day, no matter what. And to your second point about the sort of people who seek it out and learn from it, the people who are successful in sales, who become managers or enterprise reps or move throughout their career, have long-standing careers, not that they become numb and desensitized to it, but they actually don't see failure as failure, and they recategorize it and deal with it in their own head. Because if you take those failures as like emotional setbacks, you're screwed. You're never going to make any progress. And I think for the right personality, that radical feedback and that like brash understanding that you failed is good. But if someone's a little bit more sensitive, is not used to failure, like this happens all the time. You think about it in like a social setting. It's like, if you just using like a human instinct, if you see an attractive person of the opposite sex and you want to go introduce yourself, and you know how to do that physically and you want to do it, but you're scared. And you're not scared because you don't know what to do. You're scared because the person's going to say no and you're going to fail. So if you get over that hump and you realize that it's not a numbers game, but it's really about the act of doing and not being scared of the outcome, then you're going to be more successful in just acting and learning and adjusting and updating. But if you just sort of sit there crippled in fear that you're going to fail or get rejected, you're screwed in everything in life.
And how did you become comfortable with that failure? Because obviously, when were you like that when you first started in sales?
100%. I can remember my first day on the job. So I didn't come, like, I was a finance graduate from uni. So numbers, and almost everyone in my class went to go work for the bank or become an accountant. And naturally, I'm a pretty social person, and I couldn't imagine sitting behind a desk my entire career and crunching numbers. It just want to put a hole in the head. So I tried to go find something else, and I stumbled into sales through a friend of mine who was working at a company. Seemed like a great place to go. I had no idea what it meant for sales. Do I have to do phone calls, emails? Do I have to get on video calls? Like whatever. I didn't know face to face. I have no clue. And all I remember is on the first day, they give you like a book and you have to like read and study this script essentially of like how to do the sale. And I can remember vividly my manager hearing me on my first few calls, and my whole face like became red and my hands were just absolutely sweating because I was so scared of this person on the other line, like what they're going to think of me and how they're going to tell me to F off and stuff like that. So I was never like this, but the wins associated and when you got a yes and when you got a sale, like that high and that dopamine hit was just so good that I just like wanted to go all in and learn and evolve over time. And it took me a long time. It took me like 2 years probably to become like average salesperson and get used to this discomfort. But I realized like your tone matters and your opening line mattered and the way that you connected with people, how you spoke to them and how you followed up and all these things. Like these things all matter in terms of sales and how you're going to be more successful. But on day one, I was scared shitless and I failed for months. But if you can push through it, you can benefit on the other side.
But how did you get comfortable being uncomfortable? Because I'm just thinking about, new salespeople that might be listening to this that, that it's the most daunting thing thinking about all that rejection and they can't get used to it. How do you get used to it?
Exposure. It's exposure therapy. Like if you, and speaking to the audience or anyone else, like if you have something that you want to sell or you're trying to do something or you have an idea, and we can sort of talk about this, is like the business I'm running now is the 5th business that I ever started. The first business I started was one of my friends was working for a company at the time. I thought it was an interesting idea. I'm like, why can't I go do that? And literally all I did is I set up a Gmail account and I emailed like 100 potential customers. And I realized like, is this a good service? Do people like me? Do they not like me? Am I speaking their language? And I just went and did it. And I think if you're trying to figure out how to be comfortable with failure, or looking to figure out how to sales, but you're sort of don't know where to start, go try to talk to someone about what you're doing. And through that exposure, you're going to realize pretty quickly if it's sellable, if people want it, if they don't want it, and you're also going to deal with rejection and you're going to deal with failure. So I think a huge thing about it is exposing yourself to failure as frequently as possible is the best way to learn and become comfortable with it. It's not going to happen overnight. There's no such thing as a human being that likes failing from day one. But there are examples of people who become comfortable with failure and understand that it's part of business because they've done it. It's not something that you can train yourself on overnight. It's not something you're sort of born with, but it's something that if through exposure and through opportunity, you can benefit from. And I strongly believe that because I did that. And that's how I became comfortable with it.
Yeah. So it's kind of like what we said, right? It's getting the reps in. Actually, and is that your main advice to new salespeople then? Essentially just get on the phone and get your reps in and get, that concept of in sales of, getting to know.
Yes, I think that's my advice to anyone. Like, think about yourself. Like you started this podcast and this media outlet. When you had the idea, what were your emotions leading into? Were you concerned that it was going to fail? Or are you uncertain with how it was going to go? Or like, what was that for you on day one when we started this journey?
Well, I think that I've done enough listening to podcasts and sort of hearing people talk about their podcast journey to know that, like anything, particularly social media or marketing wise, it doesn't just work on day one.
Yeah,
I was listening to Alex Hormozzi's podcast the other day, and he said, he spent his podcast didn't actually hit the, top 100 podcasts in the US for 5 years. So I know that it's a long game.
100%. And so to my point before about exposure, it's like when you started down this journey for a podcast, you had exposure to other people who've gone down this path before you, learn from them, understand what the process is. Therefore, you can learn and change your expectation of like what failure looks like and redefine that. Where if you're just coming into it blind and you're like, hey, I'm going to launch a podcast, I want to get 10,000 followers, the first month and you got no followers, you would think that was a failure. But now you've had exposure through other people in the industry and learning from others that that in the first 5 years, if you don't get 10,000 followers, that still is not going to be a failure. So I think one is like exposure through learning, but two, exposure through doing can reframe your mindset on failing and help you cope with it better. Because that's the only way to do it, because failure is not like a set goal or finish line or whatever it may be. It's really more your perception on the situation and what failure really is.
Definitely. No, it's a really fascinating subject, how those sales and the concept of failure interact. So what did your transition look like then from being that successful salesperson to moving into the entrepreneurial space?
Yeah, so it didn't happen quickly. For me, and I don't know if this resonates with anyone else, is like I always in the back of my mind always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I always wanted to run my own business. I always wanted to be my own boss. I didn't know in what form or what situation I was going to be. I know I'm not Zuckerberg. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the most well-educated. I'm not the most well-connected. I'm not the most well-spoken. But I knew that most of these people running business aren't anything special either, but they just took the chance and they made it happen. So for me, I always had that thought in the back of my head, but I wanted to make money and grow my career and be proud of myself. So I never really had the guts from day one to go and start a business, see what was going to happen. So for me, I had a sales career for 10 years. And throughout that career, I've launched, this is my company I'm running now, is the 5th company that I tried to launch. And they're all in different industries. They're all for different reasons. But I think one benefit to myself, and again, going back to the sales career, is like I've always had like a bias towards action. And when I see an opportunity or when I see a chance, I'm not scared to go take that chance and try to run with it and run with that idea. Like if you saw my phone, I have a note tab in my phone that's just a list of hundreds of business ideas. And some of them I like, some of them are stupid, some of them I actually tried. But for me, I knew it was going to take a couple swings at the plate to figure out, one, like how the hell do you run a business and what is a business? But two, I needed to figure out what business really suited me and what I wanted out of it. And we can go into the different businesses that I ran, but the 4 businesses that I started while I was currently employed actually taught me more about what I didn't want in my business than what I did want in a business. Because I had exposure to different things in different industries of like, hey, this doesn't suit my personality. This doesn't suit my lifestyle. This doesn't have the growth trajectory that I think it could have. And when I started these businesses, some of them were just registering an email. Some of them, I set up a website and had revenue and Stripe links and was collecting money. And some of them were just one client that I was working with. Or some of them weren't even a client at all because I realized it was a shitty business. But it was really more about dipping my toe into business and testing things while I was currently employed. So I had that fallback net. But then when I found something that I really thought had legs and something I could really get behind and get excited by, I had to jump 2 feet in and go all in on it, which is my business that I'm in today.
Why do you think it took you 10 years to transition into full entrepreneurship? And also, why do you think you didn't go into full start your own business, full entrepreneurship, straight after you graduated? Was there something holding you back?
Yeah, so I think there's 2 things. One emotional and one skill. Emotional is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of judgment, fear of failure. So like on the emotional side, like I know for a fact, I'm very self-aware. Like I was scared about how people were going to judge me, how my parents were going to think about me, if I was going to fail, like all that kind of stuff. The other side of it was from a skill set. I didn't have an exposure to anything. When you graduate from university, you are irrelevant to the world. You have no real life experience. You have no exposure to real business. So I also knew if I wanted to start right out of school, I had no clue what to do. I had no exposure. I had no access to anything. I had no thoughts that were really like stimulant or providing true value. And I think everyone who goes to uni has like the same ideas. It's like, oh, I can start a marketplace where everyone can buy and sell their books and their stuff. Or you can go and create a study groups and courses online where people can buy old tests and stuff like that. Like everyone has the same mindset because that's what you're around. And I think through my career and through business, you get exposed to different things and you learn what you gravitate towards and you learn what you avoid. And then you also learn what things have problems. And my business that I run now was something that I exported from my previous business and learned within my previous business. And I'm like, whoa, there's a big opportunity here. Like I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. So I think those are two things. It's like one, fear of failure, guaranteed from an emotional perspective. But the other side of it is like exposure and access and information. Like you're a fly in the world as a recent graduate. And as you get more exposure and work on different things, you gain more information and more knowledge.
But you said that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur. How far back did that go? Can you remember the first time you had a business idea or thought this is what I want to do?
So from using the word entrepreneur and running a business was pretty much like my second year in as an employee. I'm like, I don't want to have a boss was really the association to a business. It's like, I want to be my own boss. I want to control things. Another thing is I'm a pretty aspirational person. I don't like fancy things. I don't like material items, but I want to be successful. And if you look around, most of the successful people I know or exposed to are business owners. And once you make that correlation of like, hey, the most successful people I know, potentially the richest people, if that's what gets people excited, are business owners, then like wake up and smell the coffee. Because early in my career, like when I graduated from university with a finance degree, I did that. I like saw, I was always interested in real estate. There's a lot of rich, successful people in real estate. I started my career in commercial real estate. I bought a house when I was 26 years old and I rented it out and stuff like that. Like that was the direction I thought I wanted to go. And then I realized real estate was a way too slow paced for me. Didn't evolve quickly. There wasn't a lot of creativity. Like it just didn't suit me. Still have exposure in investments in real estate, but it wasn't something I wanted to do and get excited about every single day. I don't want to work on due diligence on an apartment building for 2 years before you buy it. Like that kills me. But through that sort of learning experience and exposure, I sort of learned from an entrepreneur's perspective where I wanted to go, but the end goal is always to be my own boss. I have 3 little kids at home. Like I want to be able to take them to school and I want to go on vacation. I want to be able to control my own schedule. And for me, if you're an entrepreneur, you can do that. If you're an employee, you got to clock in 9 to 5 and you're on someone else's schedule constantly.
So it's quite late then, because I was expecting it to be, that mindset or that motivation to be, when you're at uni or before that. So it came after all of that, and it came in some ways at the beginnings of your kind of actual employment career. Was it a reaction, therefore, to that? Did you kind of get repulsed by having a boss and having that restriction?
Yeah, 100%. I was definitely not wired for this. I was a very shy kid growing up. I was a very middling student. Like I was never top of my class. I was never like valedictorian or anything like that. So I never had big aspirations as a kid, but I think there's like different chapters in your life, right? Like when you're in elementary school, like it's about making friends and like not failing. And then when you're in uni, it's about like graduating and going social and building your network and figuring out what you want to do with your life. And then when you get into your career, then it's like, hey, how do I grow my career? And then for me, it was like, how do I turn this career into entrepreneurship and a company? So I think there's like different chapters in your life. And I definitely was never rooted to be an entrepreneur or wanted to run my own business. But as you said, it sort of evolved from exposure therapy in being an employee and not having, I think the word that I keep on coming back to is control. When I had no control over my career, truthfully, no control over my pay, I had no control over my hours, I had no control over my freedom. And if you become a successful entrepreneur, you can control your own destiny and your own time. And that's what I want to optimize my life for, is my life. I don't want to optimize my life for making money or making other people happy. Like I want to optimize the life for my life.
And that fear of failure that you mentioned, you said, the fear of being judged as well. What impacts did that have, and what kind of restrictions did it put on you and the decisions that you made?
I think the big thing is a couple like failure ideas that go in mind. I think it just created this delay. So when I was like 2 years out of university, I had a job. I realized I wanted to be my own boss. the first job or first company I tried to launch was not probably 6 years later. So I think that failure really created this gap in time. And that's just on the career side of it. Another thing which would be interesting is like I post very consistently on LinkedIn, and I try to create a voice and share information that could be valuable to people. I've been doing it for 3 years consistently, posting once or twice a week for 3 years straight. When I started to do that, and the reason I wanted to do it is I felt there was information to be shared. I thought it'd be valuable. I think it's beneficial to have a business audience was really my goal in the end of it. It took me a long time to get up the courage to do that. And even when I did it, all my friends were making fun of me, and they still joke about some of my posts and things that I do and trying to be an influencer and stuff like that. And that judgment from others, the social pressures is real. Like that has impact on everyone. But now I got 20,000 followers and everyone's like, oh, now you have an audience and an influence, and now everything looks good at the end. But when I was posting 3 years ago and had 100 people that I was connected to on LinkedIn and had 1 like on my post, it didn't look so good. And it's the same thing with my business. When I started this business, I had $0 in the bank. I had 0 clients. And I know for a fact, whether my parents were supportive or friends or whatever, they were all second guessing if this was the right thing, or they were all thought that I was going to fail. But I don't know what the stats are, but like 90+% of businesses do fail. So if you're a betting man, you should bet on someone to fail. But if you have the right skill set and mindset and stuff like that and tenacity to get it done, then you have a chance to be one of the successful ones. So I think that underlying fear of like social judgment, like failure, and I made the wrong decision, and just like putting your tail between your legs and realizing you went the wrong direction is something that crippled me for a long time. And I guess you don't realize how impactful it was unless you look retroactively, because things are going well now and my business is operating properly and I made the right career decision for myself, but it took a long time to get there.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of people will have that as well, and I think that's why you mentioned you said the word exposure a lot today, and I think it's an important concept, because if you're, well, it's the Jim Rohn quote that I love, which is you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and obviously if you're spending time with people that are just in a 9-to-5 and have that mindset of a 9-to-5, they're the ones that are more likely to be making fun of you and not being supportive. But obviously if you're hanging around with, business owners, entrepreneurs, people with different aspirations, they're going to be the ones that are going to be supportive and encouraging of that, isn't it? And that's why, I said the word exposure, because if you're exposing yourself to those role models and peers who are thinking differently and thinking more like you, you're going to get a kind of different response, and you're more than likely to help overcome some of those fears and some of those fears of judgment.
100%. Yeah, I think you said in your social circles and the people you surround yourself with, I think you said it really well. Like you're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. Like that's your true reality, is what you're exposed to and who you interact with. And I this sort of remind me of this concept that I think it was Kevin Hart, like the comedian, was talking on one of the late night talk shows. He was talking about his success and stuff like that. And now everyone sees the success, but no one saw the 10 years or 5 years or whatever it was when he was in shitty little comedy clubs telling jokes to a 5-person crowd and no one was laughing. And I think comedians have this very particularly, because every comedian, or the majority of comedians, come up through the ranks on open mics and testing bits and failing up jokes and in these little shitty bars and doing tours. And then next thing you know, they have a Netflix special. And everyone sees him and comes to love him as the Netflix special person. But when they're in the dungy little club talking to 5 people, they're irrelevant. And everyone can see the success, but no one can see the grind ahead of time. And I think that's a big thing about failure, is like everyone wants to project the successes and not talk about the failures that help them get there. But everyone has failures in life. Like it's very short-sighted or sort of ignorant to think that people don't fail. Like everybody fails all the time to get to where they are today.
I think that's a really great analogy as well, because comedians, similar to what we were talking about at the beginning, which is salespeople, they have to go through the reps of failure in order to test their jokes and routines, in order to hone something that then will get them to, you know, the next level and get them that TV series. So it's a very similar process of having to go through the process of failure to get to success. So I think it's a great kind of analogy. So talk us through these 4 companies that didn't work.
Yeah, so they're from a very, very vast range, and I'll say, as I mentioned before, like I think these companies did a couple of things for me. It's like they allowed me to understand what business is and how to operate them, but it also made me understand like what businesses I didn't want to be in. And I don't know if this resonates with you or anyone who's listening to this, but as a younger person, I was very intimidated with the concept of business. When you think about a business, you think about an office and HR staff and payroll and customers and invoicing and all these like assets to a business to make it work. And it's super daunting. Like it sounds like it's a lot. It sounds like a lot of work. It sounds like a lot of responsibility. But when I started these businesses, I'll tell you about the 4 of them specifically. I realized that business is very simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's very simple. Provide a product, a service, a widget that someone is willing to buy for more than it costs you to create or provide. And if you keep it that simple, you realize that it's not really rocket science. And that's really from taking point A, which is idea, to point B, which is getting your first customer. That is a business. Then how do you get to point Z is a completely different story. And that takes a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of logistics and responsibility and investments. But I think a lot of people in business, and speaking for myself, is I always had this big idea, point A, and I was already thinking about point M way down the line.
True.
But for me, for a business, I'm like, hey, here's the idea. Let's just get our first customer, which is point B. And my first business that I tried, I had a friend of mine who was working at an estate sale business. So when someone sells their house or wants something, whatever, they're running an estate sale business and you'd sell everything in the house. And it was very interesting because at the time I sell a ton of stuff on Facebook Marketplace and eBay just to get rid of old things. I always like that, the hustler in me, to make a couple bucks here and there. But at the same time in North America, there's a big franchise business called 1-800-GOT-JUNK. And it's this huge junk removal business, very explicit business. It's in the UK as well. But it's a phone number. You call them, they come and pick up your junk. One-time charge, whatever it is, you have leftover junk, they'll come pick it up. So it's a garbage disposal business. And there's all these articles, they're huge. I don't know, probably like $1 billion company now. My idea is like, why isn't there a 1-800-JUNK company for estate sales? It's a service that could be valuable. Everyone's selling their houses. Everyone wants to get rid of their shit. Like, wouldn't it be helpful if you just called the business and did an estate sales? So that was my business hypothesis. All I did, which goes to my sales tactics and sort of my bias towards action, I registered a domain. It was like torontoestatesales@gmail.com. And I emailed, I'm like, who has access to houses that are looking potentially for estate sales services? I went and emailed 1,000 real estate agents in Toronto and said, hey, this is what we do. If you have any clients that are looking to sell their stuff as they close their house, we're happy to provide you with estate sales services. I got a client. I had a real estate agent call back saying, hey, or emailed back saying, hey, I actually have a client who's selling their parents' house. Their parents passed away. They have a full house. No one wants to deal with it. Like, we would love to use your service. Keep in mind, this is like a 24-year-old kid who doesn't have a website or I don't even have a professional email. So I scheduled an appointment. I took my dad's, my dad had a fancy camera at the time. I took my dad's car. I took my dad's camera and I took a clipboard from my brother's room and put a piece of paper on it and a pen. I showed up on the site, introduced myself, blah, blah, blah. This is what we're going to do. I said, I'm going to go walk around. I'm going to take pictures of everything in the house. I'm going to itemize it and send you a spreadsheet with what we think we can get for the house. We take 50%. You take 50%. See you later. The real estate agent said, great. I went around, took all the pictures, and then I got home and I started categorizing these old couches and light fixtures and plates and pots and stuff like that. I'm like, this is a horrible business. I'm going to do all this work. I'm going to make a couple $1,000 maybe. And I'm just going to go around selling old junk all the time. And I realized right there, I called her back saying like, hey, thanks for the time. Like, doesn't look like it's going to be a good fit for us. Like, all the best. And I realized very quickly in a week, one, I could do this business if I wanted to because it happened. But two, I realized like this was not the business for me. I came from the tech sales world where you sit behind a computer and you make sales and do things with people all around the world. And I realized this was like very localized. It was very face-to-face. It was very limited with how big and how quick this business could go. And on that spot in a week's time, I came up with the idea. I tested the business. I got a customer. And I realized in that moment that it wasn't for me.
I mean, that's extremely fast feedback, isn't it? And the concept of minimal viable products, you pretty much did that, and that concept of failing fast as well. I mean, it's arguable whether you failed or not, because you kind of in some ways chose not to pursue it, but you certainly got to the point of realization and minimal viral product very, very quickly.
Yeah. So, but the funny thing is like, so I just told that story from my vantage point. If someone else was in my shoes and they sent out one email trying to tell the service, someone about the estate sale service, and that person didn't email back, someone could view that as a failure. I thought the service would work. I reached out to someone, they said no. For me, from a sales background, I sent 1,000 emails out and I got one person responding back. That was a win. So from my perception, I actually saw that as a win. I got a client, had a chance to make money, and then I just had to walk away for a bit. So, and that's why going back to what I mentioned before about sort of perception and how you view things, I didn't see anything of a fail. Like sending out the 1,000 emails, that was a win. I got a client. Going to the show and interact, or going to the open house and taking all the pictures, that was a win. And then when I realized that this business sucks and I didn't want to do it, that could be viewed as a fail because I wasted a week of my time. But I actually saw it as a win because I learned for myself when I do go and do my business. I realized that I didn't want to be geographically limited and I didn't want to carry inventory, because with this estate sale business, you had to manage all these items and clothing and furniture and all this kind of stuff. So you weren't carrying inventory, but you had to track inventory and make sure things were transacted appropriately.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point you made, that essentially, because of your sales background, that firstly prompted you, I think, to probably think in volume, to go, I will send out 1,000 emails. Some people might have probably done 200 and thought that was enough, but no,
wouldn't even know where to find the emails or how to do it, right? Like there's all these little trigger points that they have to do before they make it happen.
And I think that point about perception, and similar to what we were talking about earlier in exposure, you were expecting a very, very small, percentage to reply.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that was like my goal is just to get one reply. And I got one customer. So you got to set the sort of right expectations to figure out what failure is. And you can define your own failure. Like my job was to go and send emails and get one customer. Therefore, it was a win. If my perception before is to win 5 customers, then I failed. So I think you have to be realistic with outcomes and know what's a realistic outcome as well.
But given what you said earlier, you said, you had a fear of failure, and that's why it took you 6 years to essentially, try and launch something. And then the first thing that you launched sort of failed, in inverted commas, within a week. Did that not then firstly put you off from doing it again, but secondly, kind of feed into the narrative that you're going to get judged and you are going to fail, and everything that you were probably fearing was correct?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess 2 things is one, which I think was a point to this, is like I did this business. No one knew about it. My dad was the only one who knew about it because I took his camera and I took his car. So no one even, like I couldn't have any social judgment because my friends didn't know about it. Like, was that on purpose? About it. Yeah, it was. I think subconsciously it was, because I didn't want to be judged for failure. And even when I started this business, my current business, which is successful, like no one knew about it until a month or 2 in, when I actually had paying customers. So I think that was like a coping mechanism or some sort of blocker to make sure that I wasn't being socially judged. And yeah, I'm very aware, like I'm a relatively emotional person. Like I don't want to be judged negatively. The other side of it, which is I think into the bigger conversation, is I am a natural optimist my entire life. I've always been a glass half full person. it's rooted in my blood. Like my dad is an optimist. Like we'll go play golf and it'll say 99% chance of rain. And he'll be like, don't worry. He calls himself the Weathermeister. He's like, you're with the Weathermeister. We'll get sun. It's just who he is. So I don't know if that's DNA or that's nature or nurture or whatever it may be from where I grew up, but I am a natural optimist, which I am very grateful for because it sounds miserable to be a pessimist. I always see the bright side in situations. So I guess that's a bigger conversation if that's naturally rooted in the people or that can be trained or learned. But I think having or training yourself to become optimistic is an insane superpower. And especially as an entrepreneur, you have to be optimistic. Because if you are negative or you're pessimistic or you get caught up on failure, you're never going to be able to get stuck out of the mud and then you're going to be stuck there forever.
No, I completely agree that you need to be optimistic in business because there is so many setbacks and you need to stay positive, I think, as well. And also it's difficult to do forecasting if you're just thinking of worst case scenarios all the time, even though it's important.
Let the CFO or something like that be the
Yeah, exactly.
The specific persona for that.
So that obviously was the first business, and then there was another 3 others, and it's tell us about those because I'm fascinated how this journey went on.
I'll go through a few of them, and we can go into as much or as little detail.
Did they get quicker? That's the thing. If you did that in a week, did you do one in a day and then?
At all different timelines, but no, that was the quickest one. Which was really into my point before. It was like A to B. That's it. Like, here's an idea. Can I get a customer? And then figure out if you want to do it. So the estate sale business was the first business I tried to run. And the funny thing is, I didn't have any customers. I didn't make any money, but I still consider that a business because it was an idea executed on stuff like that. I didn't incorporate a company. So it depends how you want to define a business. The second business I was running was when I was like in the midst of my sales career. I realized there was like, this is sort of the data boom where you can get people's email addresses and cell phone numbers very easily. And I realized a lot of people didn't have access to this information from a sales perspective. And my idea, again, this is also when like newsletters were very popular, email newsletters. Like, would it be beneficial if people had a monthly email newsletter, which is a tactic that I used in sales, that would provide you with a lead list of every single company in your city or whatever city you wanted that recently raised money, with the CEO's name, their email address, and their phone number. So every month, and I started this company, I had a website, we had clients, made a couple $1,000. The service it was called Out Prospect. The idea is you can outsource your prospecting. Is every single month, we would send you an email that would summarize like local news from your city. And it would, in that email, would have an attached spreadsheet of every single company that recently raised money, how much money they raised, what industry they're in, their website, their CEO's name, email address, and phone number. We just mined the data, we put it together, and we had clients who were ready. We had a commercial real estate agent, we had a recruiting firm, we had all these different clients that signed up on our website, and every single month I would write an email newsletter to Toronto, Chicago, Boston, like all these different cities. I would go through, find local news articles. I would summarize them. So I'd summarize the top 5 news articles that month. I'd put together a Google spreadsheet with their information. I would send it out to them. So every single month, you get a fresh batch of 100, 200, 1,000 leads of people who've recently raised capital. So therefore, they have money to spend and potentially want to buy your services. And we ran it. I learned how to do Wix, signed up for a Wix website, created a website for a couple $100. I charge $100 a month per city that you subscribe to. And I think we made $3,000 or something. I say we, it was just me. I think I made $3,000 or something like that, or $2,500 or something like that on that business. And truthfully, I still think it's valuable. I think it could be.
I mean, it sounds like a good idea to me. So, I mean, now I'm intrigued.
If anyone's listening to this, go ahead. You can run the business. I can sell you my old domain. I think it just expired. I just got a notification from GoDaddy this past month or something that it expired. But yeah, I despised doing it. I didn't want to write the articles. I had pretty high churn, like customers would come on for a month or two and then would cancel their subscriptions. It didn't feel good. It didn't feel like a win. It didn't feel sustainable. It could be a good business for someone. It wasn't a good business for me. So in that business, I sort of learned, like, I want to wake up every day and be excited to run this business and see value in it. And also I was going $100 at a time. Like it was going to take a lot of subscriptions and a lot of clients to be able to get to any sort of reasonable volume. So that was my second business. I'll have to Google the website or check the website. And how long was that? Like, I ran for like 6 months or something like that. So yeah, I ran it for 6 months and wrote 6 newsletters, and then just shut it down. Canceled everyone's Stripe accounts, told them that we're shutting it down, and see you later.
And how did you get clients for that? I presume, because the newsletter had to come after you got the clients, right? So I presume you managed to somehow prospect some clients, get them on board, and then to do the newsletter.
I'm a salesperson, so I'm just a strict outbound machine. So I go and I would niche it down and say, Toronto, Chicago, Boston, those are the 3 markets I wanted to go after. And I had like 10 different industries. So I'd say, hey, accounting firm, would it be helpful if you found all the companies that just recently raised money? They're probably looking for bookkeeping services. That would be the message to them. And then I would go after all the commercial real estate agents and say, hey, would it be helpful to have a list of every company that recently raised money? They're probably looking to buy new office space. That message resonated with them. And then I would just go from industry to industry. So I had this all set up every single city, so the 3 cities. And then I had like 10 different industries. And I would have like a specific wording and communication that would resonate with that group of people. Some resonated more than others, but yeah, that was outreach strategy. It was literally just one by one, reaching out and trying to get them interested to buy the platform.
That was all cold outreach then?
Cold outreach. Unfortunately, I'm a one-trick pony. I'm a salesperson, so it's always been cold outbound. I'm not a marketing guru or anything like that.
All right. No, that's but that also shows that if you get your niche right, if you do the foundational work up front and you've been very targeted and very clear about who your audience is, you can have success.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, you just got to figure out the audience, but I think that's the big thing at sales is no one cares about you. They care about themselves. Like you have to speak their language, not your language. So you have to figure out the message that's going to resonate with them.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting themes coming out across these 2 businesses. And we can come to that. It sort of sounds like you were kind of finding your way and in some ways using these as slight experiments. But we'll come back to that question. What was number 3?
So the third business sort of piggybacks on the first 2. So as you said, my career in sales has exposed me to certain skills that a lot of people don't have, a lot of business operators don't have. So I started a consulting business. And a lot of founders and CEOs and people who are running businesses who didn't have sales exposure, didn't know how to do it, and needed the support. So I was a sales consultant. I would come in, help them strategize, jump on pitches, give feedback, help them run templates and sequences and stuff like that. And I was consulting most of the time for a startup. So under 20 employees, either like pre-seed or seed stage, and I had 3 clients at one point. And it was fine. Like it was just knowledge sharing, right? Execution. But my biggest issue, and again, going through reason and what I learned is like, as a consultant, you're a third party. You're giving advice, you're providing guidelines, you're giving feedback. You're not executing. And we would have these sessions weekly or whatever it was, talk about what we're going to do, implement them, blah, blah, blah. We come back the next week and the CEO would be like, oh, I was too busy. I was doing this. We haven't done anything. No progress. And it was great. I was getting paid, but I hated it. Like I want to execute. I want to see results. And if I'm not at the control or not fully bought in and involved in what's going to happen, like there was just no connection between strategy, planning, and execution. And I consulted for those 3 businesses, shut it down because I really didn't enjoy doing it because there was no result. It was just information sharing, and then people get caught up in their own worlds and not take anything from it or see any true value from it and execution on it. And stopped consulting for businesses, but it just wasn't scratching the itch that I needed.
And how long did you do that for?
I was probably on 6 months as well, maybe even less, like 4 months or something like that. 4 to 6 months, like in that range. And a couple of them, like I was consulting for, 2 of the 3 were just like, we don't need you anymore, or like business is going in a different direction, like we're going to terminate the contract, which is perfectly fine because it wasn't mutually beneficial anyways. And then one of them, I just said, hey, like, I don't enjoy doing this. Like, we're going to part ways. So relatively quick turnaround in like the timeline of business is like 4 to 6 months is not a lot of time.
So it's interesting. You're still, you're not getting above the sort of 6 month mark at this point.
100%. And it's funny. And you look at my timeline as a career, like most of the time I've only worked somewhere for like 2 to 4 years. So I just like being challenged. I like trying new things and doing new things. And I think that's where you learn the most. I don't really like staying put too much, and that's like a personal preference. But yeah, they're relatively short sprints to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And the last company as well was relatively short. It was like 6 months. But this one is like more like we incorporated and I had co-founders and like we went and did different things. And this one was interesting as well. This was more of like a personal itch. And this was recent when ChatGPT came out, sort of this exposure to AI and different things. And I had a personal problem I was going through. Nothing serious, but I was married at the time, starting to have kids, and my lifestyle has changed significantly. My spend has changed. And I looked at my wallet and I had the same credit card I had when I was like a recent graduate. And I started to look into credit cards and I'm like, which one's the best points? Which one's the best cash back? Like, what should I use? And it was so confusing. There was so much information out there. I'm like, why can't there be an AI model that will just help me find the best credit card for myself? And with AI and these algorithms and stuff, you can do that. And we started a business. It's called CardGuru.ai. It still exists. I sold my equity back to the other co-founders and they're still running with it. But essentially it was like you can plug in your spend. It'll automatically tell you what's the best credit card for your lifestyle. Depending on what your spending is, how much you spend on food and travel and blah, 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 and whatever, it'll tell you which credit card's best for you. And it was all based off affiliate fees. So once you pick the credit card companies will kick you back $100, $500, depending what the kickback was, for that lead source. So the users were getting the best credit card for themselves. The credit card companies were getting new leads that were going to be a good fit for them. So it seems like a great fit. The financial industry is very regulated, which is a huge barrier and restriction in that industry. And also is relatively technical. I'm not a technical person. Like that's not my background. I'm not wired to be a CTO and dev stuff and AI and stuff like that. Like I feel like I'm out of my depths. So we spun it up. We had a couple of partnerships. We had some traffic to the website and users and stuff like that. 2 co-founders here in Canada. We had a company together. We incorporated together. I said, guys, like I'm going in a different direction. Like I just don't see myself doing this long term. It's not a good fit for me. And I sold my equity to them. Now they're still running with it and trying to grow it. So if anyone's looking to optimize their credit card spend, feel free to check out CardGuru.ai.
And again, it sounds like a great idea. And how long were you involved in that?
Probably a similar timeline, not truthfully, like 4 months, something, 4 to 6 months, not even. From like iteration, from like idea to iteration and product.
And obviously that's quite a different one in terms of to the others that you had co-founders. So how did that come about? How did you meet those co-founders and come up with the idea?
Yeah, so I had that idea and in my spare time I started to research it and understand the ChatGPT and AI and stuff like that. And I was in a Discord. I joined a Discord group, like an AI Discord group. And everyone was there was just talking about different projects they're working on, ideas. In one of the chats, I just posted the idea saying like, hey, I'm not a technical founder. Here's my business idea. Does this scratch anyone's itch? Does anyone find this interesting? And I connected with probably 6 or 7 like developers. And I met with these 2 guys that are in Canada. And one of them said like, I have 40 credit cards and I love doing this. Like he was like passionate about optimizing credit cards and points. And he was a developer. And it just seemed like a great fit. He was a super nice guy. He flew to Toronto. We met. We went out for lunch. We rented like a house and did like a session, like offsite together and stuff like that. We each put money into the company, and that's how the business started. So that's how I put the idea out there into the world and connected with different people and found the right fit. But yeah, they're still running with it, and I hope it is a smashing success. But I'm not involved with the business anymore at all.
And what made you, I suppose, be okay with, you're the one that came up with the idea, then you're the one that walked away from it. And I don't know, that some people might not have handled it that way, but you seem fairly okay with it. You weren't wedded to that idea and that company.
Oh, one, I've realized in business, like an idea is worth nothing. Execution is everything, and execution is a lot of work and blood, sweat, and tears in doing it. So I wasn't willing to put that in, and I'll let someone else either die on that sword or be successful with that sword. So yeah, I'm a very fair person. Like, I'm not a greedy person. I'm not like a super aggressive person. Like, if this is where you're going to spend your time on, like, you should benefit from it. If I'm just sitting on the side, I'm the one who put up their hand and came up with an idea, I don't deserve anything. Like, I can come up with the next idea for an Apple product. Doesn't mean that I should get the credit for the Apple product. You have to go and execute and get it done. So I don't know. That's my personality, truthfully.
So, I mean, well, I think, let me ask you, what do you think the patterns are or the commonalities between those four companies and, the way that you kind of executed them and the way that you kind of, I suppose, ended them?
I truthfully like to pose the question to you. Do you see a commonality in these different businesses and things that you see? And we haven't known each other for a very long time, but I think it would be interesting to get like an outsider's perspective of similarities or learnings or adjustments or exposure to does that resonate with you?
I think firstly, it sounds like you were trying to find your path a little bit and using them as an experiment to find, sort of test some ideas out and to kind of just run some experiments to see what resonated with you.
Yeah.
But I think the question for me is, was that something you were conscious of? Was it like, I'm going to test all these things out and see what sticks for me? Or was it, did you have bigger intentions than that? When you launched the sales consultancy business, because that sounds, again, like a good business idea, particularly with your sales skills. You could have easily, hired staff if that had gone well and things. So how intentional were you about them being experiments? Or was it that you kind of went into them thinking, no, this could actually be the business?
Yeah, so there's a good observation. So I never thought end game with any of these businesses. I'm like, this is something of value. Let's go see if we can execute on it. And that was really my mindset going into every business. It's like, here's a hypothesis. Can I go execute on it and get it done? And if you can do that hundreds of times, then you can build a great business. If you can't do it one or two times, then it's not going to go very long. But I think the big thing for me and the underlying piece to me is, does this get me excited every single day to work on it and hustle and put my time and energy into this? Or do I dread doing it? And do I have underlying thoughts that this isn't the right fit? And for all four of those, I very quickly had that feeling. And I've had that feeling in jobs previously where I wake up every day, I don't like what I'm doing. And I've worked long enough, I've saved enough money, I've done whatever to give myself the freedom to be very honest with myself in those situations of like, hey, here's an idea, let's go test it. If it works and I feel great, let's go all in. If it works and I feel like shit, let's stand out. Or if it doesn't work and I feel like shit, let's stand out. And that's interesting in my business now is like from day one, I saw the demand, I saw value, I saw the connection, and I got super excited about doing it. And the other thing, which I think is really important to talk about, is in business, you have to understand what game you're playing. Business is not an equal game. There's multiple games out there and you have to decide what you want to play. Do you want to play the long game and build a tech company and get $1 billion valuation and go public? Do you want to run a profitable business in your local community and provide jobs and give back to your community? Do you want to acquire a business and take over an old one and try to turn it around? Like, there's a lot of games and businesses to play. And I think through this, I learned what game I wanted to play. And I learned like what I didn't want and what I did want in a business. And the business I run now, we can go into that. It checks all those boxes. And I'm very, very clear on the vision and lifestyle I'm trying to play for. And that's what the business is going to deliver for me.
And with this new business, how long have you been doing that now?
So I've been doing it since January this year.
Right.
So it's been 10 months.
So is it gone past the sort of timeline of the others?
Oh yeah, I'll be doing this for the foreseeable future, hopefully for the rest of my life. Like this is checks all the boxes, has the right fit, gives me the lifestyle that I want, is playing in the game that I want. So yeah, it's a really important thing to do. But going to the beginning of the story is like, would have never got here if I didn't take a job that I hated, if I didn't get the sales skill that I had, if I didn't try these other businesses, or if I tried these businesses, I stuck with these other businesses. So I think through these steps and going to the theme of the podcast and your outlet is like all the trials and tribulations leading up to this, the wins and the failures, result in the end result. And I think going back to the analogy of the comedian, like I'm playing with the Netflix special right now, and I've been in the clubs for 12 years trying to figure out where I want it to go. And if the general public perceives me now, or looks at my brand, or looks at the business, or looked at my P&L statement, they would see the success, but they wouldn't see all the stories that I just shared with you. And that is really why I wanted to come to the podcast. That's why I really wanted to share the story, because all the flash and glamour doesn't come with all the failures that lead up to it. And I just explained 4 failures that I've had, but I've had hundreds of failures prior to that. These are just 4 from a business perspective that are relevant to the conversation.
One other observation I had that I wanted to run past you was that the theme across all those other businesses was that it was your decision to walk away because for whatever reason they didn't kind of land with you, they didn't resonate. But going back to that thing that you said at the beginning, where you said you had that fear of failure, you had a fear of judgment. Do you think subconsciously, because if you don't start the business, you don't actually fail in other people's eyes. You don't get the judgment of other people if you haven't, built it and then fallen. Do you think in some ways, consciously or subconsciously, walking away from some of those businesses was a way of protecting yourself from that judgment and the fear of failure that you talked about?
Yeah, I think it's a very good and appropriate call out, and I've never thought about it that way, but yes, I think it was a self-preservation move because one, either if I wasn't passionate about it, that it wasn't going to become successful, or it wasn't working and I walked away from it. But all these things were never with the social recognition. I never really broadcasted these things. I always did it behind closed doors. So yeah, I think it's a very accurate call out that maybe some of these things I walked away from were selfish because I didn't want to be judged negatively. And some of them probably were selfish in a good way as well, that they helped me move on to something better or bigger or different that was going to be better suited to me. So you're probably right. But I think that's a valuable lesson for most people is like, you got to be very honest with yourself when things are working, when things aren't working. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are in jobs that they hate, relationships that they hate, whatever, situations that they hate, and they're not honest with themselves that things could be better or they need to make a change. So yeah, if you're very, very self-aware, like doesn't mean you should quit everything, but in certain situations, you're probably best served to be honest with yourself and realize that you failed or you're in a failing situation and move on and try something else.
So how do you, I think I'm always keep coming back to though as well, like how do you know that this business that you're currently running now why is it different to the others? And or what's changed? That's probably the question I'm trying to ask. What's changed? If we think about what we just talked about, that self-preservation, has something shifted in you that now you don't want to, that you're not fearing that judgment, and you've now overcome that hurdle, and now you're going all in. You've put all the chips in, and if you fail, you're not that bothered about the judgment.
Yeah. I think it comes down to success. Is like in this role, like first things first is I know, and I have to be honest with myself, it has been and is a successful business. So that immediately takes away any fear of judgment, because I know and I can look at the numbers, and economically it's been a good move for me, and the business has been successful. The other side of that is like, I wake up every day excited to do this. I get 5-star reviews from clients, and people talk highly of me, and I get referrals, and my clients come back and buy more from us and stuff like that. Like, these are all the little lead bullets that add up to a confirmation of the correct situation or the correct move. So I don't think it's like it's not a silver bullet situation where there's like one thing that sort of tipped the scales, but I think it's all these little things that compound over time that have stripped the fear or the judgment or whatever it is away from me, that underlying fear that I've had to go in the right direction, and put my name behind it. Like, it's on my LinkedIn page. I talk about it all the time. Like, it's in my email address. I tell my friends about the company. Like, I'm broadly available to it. But in the first 2 months running the business, no one knew it existed, because again, I was trying to preserve myself just in case it did fail. And I was embarrassed when I was doing the work. I didn't tell anyone about it. But once it started to click, and I had general like social acknowledgement and success, then it gave me the personal freedom to tie my name to it and go all in. So I think for me, it's the economic success, it's the emotional success and tied to it has stripped the fear away. But that doesn't mean there's no fear in the business. Like, I'm still fearful that this whole thing can come crumbling down. Still fearful of a client being pissed. I'm still fearful of a check being bounced. Like, there's tons of fears involved with it, and it's never always smooth sailing. But the overarching fear of like social judgment is stripped away, because of the economic success is really like the underlying part beneath that.
So from what I've just heard you say, essentially the key difference in this business is it's had some traction. You've run it long enough to actually have a kind of upward trajectory in terms of growth and clients and success. You're now outwardly like talking about it, and therefore you've overcome the failure point, really, that it's, you've got it off the ground. Is that the key difference compared to the others that they didn't really have the momentum, and therefore they didn't get much sort of success in a sort of inverted commas? Is that the kind of key difference?
Yeah, I think the simplest way to put it is like qualitative and quantitatively. Is like, quantitatively, it has been successful in my eyes and my lifestyle and my finances, which is check one. Check two is like, qualitatively, I wake up every morning, I'm excited to do it. I have great conversations with clients. I am excited to open up my email. I'm excited to do this and I'm excited to do that. And those are the qualitative things that no one would be able to judge, because of the emotional side to it. So I think the combination of quantitative and qualitative check marks, and everyone has different check marks and different drivers, that has stripped the fear away of the social judgment that may have restricted me in my previous companies, which is an interesting perspective from your end. So I've never thought about it that way, and I've never positioned it that way. But the way that you're approaching and having a different conversation, I think the social fear and judgment is a way bigger part of my career, my fears, than I previously thought. And that if you have these things to back you up, to make you feel more confident or make you push past those fears, then it's helpful. It's the same idea early in my career. If I look back to the sales idea, is like, my fear of failure and rejection was always overshone if I won a deal. If I didn't win a deal, then I would still feel like I failed and to get it done or didn't hit my numbers. So I think it's the same thing as like, if you can if your wins feel big enough or you get the wins, then the failures become non-existent or irrelevant in the big picture. And then again, tying that into my optimistic side is like, if I fail 99 times and I win once, then that one win, optimistically, I know that I can do it again and again and again and over time, and everything will be okay. So I think that's the sort of parallel between my sales career and my entrepreneurial career is having the wins outshine and provide more light than the failures create darkness.
Did you ever doubt yourself though, when you got to the fourth business and you walked away again? Did you ever think, am I ever gonna find something that resonates with me?
No, I never doubted myself. I always knew there's gonna be something. I always had that lingering thought that it could happen. But also, I think through my career and through my exposure, I also realized that the people who were in positions that I desired to be in were nothing special. We're all humans. We all have different skill sets. Everyone can provide different value. There wasn't anything that was unattainable to me. So I never had doubt that something was going to happen. I might have had frustration and concerns of the pace it was happening and where it was going to happen. But I never had doubt that it wasn't going to happen.
So just wrapping up, final few questions. We've talked a lot today about fear of failure, and I it's always a subject that I like to ask guests about, because I think that will hold a lot of listeners back that want to start their own businesses or want to start a new venture or even a new project within their business. Given how much we've talked about that concept in through your eyes today, what advice would you give to those people?
It's a tough question. I think it's so personality based, but I think the overarching theme and something that I've benefited from is change the perception of failure and try to consider it as a learning. And that doesn't mean you're avoiding failure, but I think the idea of failing is so negative and so visceral to certain people that if you just change the word to learn from fail to learn, your mindset and your approach and your interest in doing it or your fear toward it will disappear. And if you can train your mind and you can think about it that way, you can rewire yourself to fail more and just change the F word to an L word and you'll be a lot better served. So it's a lot easier said than done, but I think that's probably the most important thing. And as we've communicated throughout this is like, first job, I learned. Sales career, I learned. Starting 4 businesses, I learned. Now I'm running my current business and I've learned plenty about the current business and I'm going to continue to learn. So I think one thing I would say and one thing I would sort of lead off to is like, think about failure as learning and you'll be much less intimidated about it and you will fail more. Therefore, you'll learn more and get better quicker. But if you fear of failure forever, you're just going to be crippled and stuck in the situation you're in right now.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice, just to be intentional about the language we use as well. I think it's so important. It's so related to the mindset and our perceptions. So final question, if you could go back in time and erase all of the business failures that we've discussed today and the ones that we haven't had time to discuss today from ever happening, so they never happened to you, would you do that?
No. An adamant no. I am not a retrospective thinker. Everything happens for a reason. You go through everything to learn and become who you are today. I want to think about the future and how I can evolve as a person. So I think all the trials and tribulations I've gone through in business and my personal life has bettered me for who I am, has created who I am. So I wouldn't have wiped any memories. I wouldn't have done anything differently. I just hope I can continuously have that progress moving forward and be happy with myself day in, day out. So I have no reservations about what's happened in the past.
Brilliant. So we always end on a quick fire round. So this is short questions and short answers. Question 1, failure is?
Learning.
What's your life's mission?
To build a beautiful family.
What's one piece of advice that you'd give to others on your deathbed?
Don't be scared to try new things.
Name one habit that keeps you resilient.
Taking my kids to school every day.
If you could be immortal and live forever, would you take it, and why?
No. I think it would take away the joys in life and the things that we have to cherish. It's the same thing on sunny days. Don't feel sunny if there's sun every single day. So I like having seasons in life, and I think having light at the end of the tunnel creates urgency and interest in everyday life.
If you could swap places with another business person in the world, who would it be?
That's a great question. I think I would switch business places with Ryan Smith. If anyone knows who that is, he's a businessman in Utah, and he sold a tech company for a couple $1 billion, and he's done my dream. In the past year, he's acquired 4 sports teams in his local city, and now he runs all the major sports teams in Salt Lake City, Utah: the basketball team, the hockey team, the soccer team, and the women's basketball team. And I think he's really optimizing life to what he wants to do. Built a career, did something else. He's passionate about sports, and now his life mission is to build the community and the sports community around his city. And I think that's just an incredible mission. Is like, if you're gonna work hard and be successful, do fun shit with your money, enjoy your life, do things that you're really passionate about. So I think he's a pretty good thing to aspire to.
Amazing story. I hadn't heard that. Heard of him, so that's great. Thank you for sharing. So Dan, where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, if anyone wants to connect, LinkedIn is my domain. So Daniel Seligman on LinkedIn, founder of Talently. Feel free to connect there. If you want to talk business, you want to talk life, LinkedIn is the best place to connect and build a relationship.
Brilliant. I'll put that in the show notes. So Dan, I know you got to run. So thank you so much for being here and for giving your time and for sharing, it's not always some easy subjects, I would say, and really coming to this with a very positive attitude, which I think is your optimistic head coming. So thanks so much for being here and sharing all of that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, and I appreciate your pushing and your guidance through this. And I think you said before we jumped on, some people see this as a therapy lesson, and I'd have to agree. And more importantly, hopefully some of the listeners and viewers gain value from this and can learn to move themselves forward.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Fail. Really hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. Please do subscribe to the show and leave us a review. It really does help us to grow and to reach more people. Do follow us on social media too. We're at Jeswood on Instagram and at Beyond the Fail on YouTube and also on Linktree. Thanks again, and see you soon.